Hi, and welcome to our Vendor Excellence series. I'm Rebecca Hammond, and joining me is Taylor Davis. Today is day one of our Sales and Retention Predictions webinars. And first, we're going to be starting with our inpatient clinical care spaces. So Taylor, before we dive in, do you want to give us a level set in terms of what we're going to be looking at today?
Thank you, Rebecca. So this is a follow-up webinar on an initial webinar that we filmed together where we described how the predictive model was built and how does it work. So there's a lot of detail there that we walked through for quite a while, and we're not going to walk through all of that. We're going to do a brief explanation of the intuition behind this model. But if you start watching this and you're getting lost about it, you may want to go back and watch the other video. It's really important to know that this is a predictive model. So when you have a predictive model, the more unique an observation is, and in this case, an observation is a product in a market, the more unique that it is, the weaker the prediction is going to be, the more poor it's going to be. And so as we walk through this, you'll see some products and market segments that are very unique. Maybe they're about to be sunset, maybe there's a new partnership, or there's an interesting sort of connection to them and the rest of the market, or they're part of a sole source enterprise type of package. Those products will tend to have weaker predictions or less accurate predictions. But even in those cases, because the model tells us why it's predicting one thing or another, it's very interesting. And so there's insights even in the poor predictions. So I think the last point of understanding before we start talking generally about the model is just that we're going to go through 11 market segments today. So we're going to go fairly quickly. But that doesn't mean the class isn't excited to dig in. This is a webinar for vendors only, and we're expecting that it's mostly vendors who are in these markets that are watching today. So even though we've gone through this quickly, that doesn't mean that the class team is not excited to walk through these predictions in depth with you, to talk about what do we think this means, and to give encouragement or recommendations about how you can improve in different areas to improve your competitiveness. So we'll talk through that. But first, before we start talking about these models, let's talk about the intuition of the model. And I think that sometimes we think, maybe it's because we use, which we're big fans of, the Net Promoter methodology. Sometimes we think that it's only the question of would you recommend this product or this service that really matters. But as we look at the recommendations that we use in our lives, so much of it is tied to the why. So let me give an example here. Let's talk about a movie. Two individuals who are talking about a movie, and one of them says to the other, "Hey, you saw that movie, was it good?" And the person says, "Oh yeah, I absolutely loved it." No conversation about recommendations for a movie stops here, right? The moment that you really know whether or not the movie, I'm thinking in my mind, so if I'm having this conversation, I may be thinking in my mind, I'm interested in a movie that has a really good script, or that's really funny, or that has really good character development. Or maybe I'm looking for a special effects type of movie, or a hero movie, or something like that. But I'm going to be listening as to why you would be saying that a movie is going to be good or bad. And so in this case, I asked the why question. What did you like about it? And you may say, "Oh wow, it's a really creative script. I've never seen a movie like that. And those two characters were just so funny." And then I take that why, I transpose it on what I was looking for, and then I decide whether or not I want to watch that movie. And we see the same thing in healthcare technology, and this model helps us understand these whys behind the recommendations that are happening out there when potential customers are talking to your customers, to be able to understand. And what are they generally looking for? They're generally looking for market leadership. They're wanting to know, do you think this is the best in the market? They're looking for innovation. They're looking for executive partnerships. They're looking for integration. They're looking for optimism in the future. So those are some of the things that customers are really looking for. And in order to be able to distill that out, to be able to look at the why, rather than look at the actual rating, so the average rating for each of the different questions, we look at what we call rank, which is compared to the other questions the class asks, which questions are rated higher or which questions are rated lower. And in order for this to be in conjunction with the fingerprint, we actually take out the rank for overall satisfaction. So you get a rank on these different questions from 1 to 15. And for every product, you can't have all of your questions rated at a 15. So there's a highest rated question down to a lowest rated question. And it's this order of what is rated high and what is rated low that really drives the backbone of our predictive model on the sales side. And then on the retention model, it's looking at this order as this rank order. And then it's also looking a lot at customer satisfaction in order to be able to see what drives the prediction. And so when we look at just the data here, we look at products that have a certain rank that are above a certain level. And there's some questions like delivery of new technology that tends to just have a low rank on average. And so when it does get above a 6, then we really tend to see higher sales and higher retention. And then there's a number of other areas like likely to recommend. We really like to see quite high, although that's a question that we see ranks of everything from 1 to 15 on. So anyway, our team is excited to dig in with you in depth as you come in and say, hey, this rank, the model's predicting low sales or low retention for us because of this rank. What does that mean? And what are some of the things that we can do to improve that? So, and it's your team that digs in with vendors as they have these questions. So
that's right. And we're excited to be able to look at this, really getting a more in-depth look segment by segment. And so, like Taylor mentioned, we have a lot to get through today. Are we ready to dive in?
Let's do 11 segments here.
Okay, here we go. So we're going to just start right out of the gate with acute care EMR. And historically, KLAS has reported on market share in this segment. And, Epic has really led sales here, followed by Cerner and Meditech. And I'm curious if the model is predicting something different than what we've seen in the past. How can you walk us through what we're seeing here?
Yes. So this is really interesting. This is the only market in which KLAS does a full census of all new sales. So as we looked over all new sales in 2020, here's what we found. Is that you really have Epic, and this is not a big surprise to the industry, Epic really seeing the lion's share of new deals. You also have, in order, you have Cerner seeing some deals, but also Cerner seeing quite a bit of turnover. And you also see Meditech seeing some new deals coming in, and then turnover on their older platforms, obviously. So not a big surprise there. And you've got a few other deals that are out there with an Allscripts or a CPSI, but really it's in this order: Epic and Cerner and Meditech, and with Cerner seeing quite a bit of turnover. And then actually, if we look at small community hospitals, you can see that Cerner really leads in that space. And so what's interesting, that's what we've seen in the past. As we look forward and we're predicting out 2022, we see a lot more of the same. And so we see low sales energy for everyone besides Epic, Cerner, and Meditech. And we also see that Cerner is likely to have low retention going forward, and Cerner is looking more innovative in the community space. So let's jump into the data. We'll talk about that. This is a view that we're going to be using today. Anytime that we have our decision insights data over the years 2020 and 2021. So on the bottom x-axis, this is the observed sales share that we saw over those 2 years. In this case, KLAS in 2020 and 2021 has come across 101 different decisions. And that's just our sampling to be able to just what are we hearing as far as decisions goes. And then on the y-axis, you have the prediction. So you can see here, Epic has the highest predicted sales. Cerner also has high predicted sales, but primarily for their CommunityWorks clinical suite. The Cerner Millennium Power Chart, which is for their larger customers, has more average to low predicted sales. And we see Meditech Expanse having high predicted sales. And so as we dig into why that is, you can see the rank. There's a lot here on this chart, and we're going to be publishing this data out in March. But we wanted to talk through that here in these webinars, and so that you can understand how to look at a lot of these. The first column that I tend to look at is the likely to recommend column. And because likely to recommend rank that's a 14 or a 15 usually means that this is a product whose customers are saying, we believe we're on the best product on the market.
Mm-hmm. And just to reiterate here, just in case there's any questions looking at this is not a comparison against each other. This is simply a comparison when they're looking at that rank of how that metric performed against all of the other metrics for that vendor.
Exactly. So these are the whys. So for instance, let's take Epic Inpatient EMR. As customers come on some of the key questions, so it's not all the questions obviously, but as customers come and talk to a potential a potential customer talks to a current Epic EMR customer, the rank of 15 on likely to recommend means that the current customer is very likely to say something along the lines of, it's the best product on the market. So when we look and we see, and actually we've done some analysis to go and look at those products with a rank of a 14 or a 15 on likely to recommend, and those are products in which we see comments from customers saying, it's the very, very best. And that's something that potential customers are looking for. And so that really drives a lot of the high predicted sales for Epic, is that current customers are indicating that it is, that they feel like it's really a leading product in the market. Other things that Epic customers are likely to talk about is the strong integration. You can see a rank of 12 there for the supports integration goals. And what we see from Epic is pretty good innovation, not off the charts. If we look at the one place where customers are reporting a high rank for delivery of new technology, it's with those Cerner Community Works customers. So there's a feeling among a lot of these community hospitals, hey, this is one of the most innovative, this is a really innovative partner for us in terms of partners that we would be able to work with. And as you look at Meditech, I think that there's really an interesting trend here. As part of a larger trend over the last several years, Meditech is becoming a better and better partner. So what's one of the highest ranks for Meditech? It is executive involvement. And that's driving a lot of, that's something that potential customers, based on this model, are likely to be positive about when they hear, hey, we've got a partner, we've got a really strong partner in Meditech in the way that they're working with us with Expanse. And that matches a lot of what we're actually hearing from current customers talking about how well Meditech is doing at partnering with them and really listening to them. So as we look at the retention model, it's the same type of chart. The observed retention, what have we seen over the last 2 years? And this is the question, is this product part of your long-term plans? You can see what we see there on the x-axis, and on the y-axis we have our prediction for retention. And again, you have Epic and Meditech with the high predicted retention. And then you have Cerner with actually low retention, and then several of the other players with very, very low retention. So this is an interesting thing as we look forward. Obviously, we've got to watch 2022 and see how it goes. But the model is predicting that we're going to continue to see growth for Meditech and Epic, and we're going to likely see a bit of a revolving door on the Cerner side.
Next up, we have data archiving. So as we are looking at this next segment, this is not usually seen as a solution that you might be excited to buy as a provider, but it is so critical to the success of these healthcare organizations. So who in this space is really predicted to have high sales?
You know, this is sort of like your snow tires type of market segment. It's something that you need. It really helps keep you safe. It's really critical, but very few people are really excited to buy new snow tires. And so as we look forward, it's interesting. You see a lot of players in this space, all with above average predicted sales. And they can't all have an above average predicted sales share because it's an average. And so what we essentially are seeing is a pretty well matched market. When it comes to retention, Galen Healthcare is lagging a little bit as customers report a little bit lower optimism. So let's look at the data here. As we look at the predictions, you can see that there are some differences. Harmony Healthcare has the highest prediction. And what are we really seeing with Harmony Healthcare? We're seeing with them and Triam that their customers rate them very high on likely to recommend, feeling like they have a real premier solution. You've got Mediquant that's a little bit lower. Customers there are especially rating lower in terms of executive involvement and partnership, and a little bit lower on the question of likely to recommend. But the differences between these different players are not dramatic. And so you have a well-matched market in a lot of cases. And so we would really expect all different players to be able to see some sales coming up in the next year. And likely, this is a market where the strength of your sales team is likely going to determine a lot of how many sales you actually land. So what's really interesting to see here is that the rank for delivery of new technology is very low for all of these different vendors. And that's probably more reflective of the type of solutions that these are. You don't have customers really looking to the future. And actually, the importance of these solutions goes down over time to customers, right? So several years out, you have very few clinicians that are logging in, that are looking at this. And so you have a low rank, but also an opportunity of what type of, how can you connect with customers going forward? Is there an opportunity, a possible way to create some disruption? When it comes to retention though, again, very high retention predicted for almost everyone, not surprising given that the class score is the best indicator of retention. When we look to Galen Healthcare, the retention is lower, and really what's the difference there is that the forecasted overall satisfaction is lower. So there's just less optimism in terms of where they're going. And we could dig in on that, but really a high retention market all around. So well matched on sales, likely to hold on to most of the customers. And that's what we would expect in this market.
Gotcha. Well, and it just seems like this market has that kind of stability, and that's critical in the data archiving space.
Yeah, you don't really want to switch solutions after you go with one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's exactly what we'd
tracks.
expect. Yeah.
All right, so next up we have drug diversion monitoring. And so this model predicts KitCheck to have average sales, but we just published a report showing that KitCheck is leading in sales. So why is that?
Yeah, so this is one of the market segments that has some really unique dynamics to it, and it ends up creating some fairly poor predictions in terms of what maybe we would really expect knowing this market really well from what the model predicts. But KitCheck customers are not reporting nearly as high satisfaction with innovation. Rank of satisfaction, they do report fairly high satisfaction. And although they are seen as the premier solution on the market, we see BD likely winning some sales because of integration. And Omnicell's choice to partner with KitCheck, so if you don't know this market well, Omnicell has a solution, and has announced that they're going to really partner with KitCheck going forward. And so you don't see that in these data nearly as much. So Omnicell shows up as having likely the highest sales. That looks really weird to anybody who knows this market well. And they would be surprised at that. KitCheck shows up as having average sales. And what's the difference between these two? Well, Omnicell, we have sort of a unique group there that we have surveyed, and it's a certain type of customer. It's a very kind of niche customer right now who has Omnicell's analytics platform, and they are reporting some positivity about innovation. That's likely Omnicell overall. And so some of these predictions are a little bit weird, we would have to say, but we want to also be transparent and show them and show what we see here. When we go and look at retention, however, KitCheck is likely to hold on to customers, and we don't see Medasist or Omnicell likely holding on to customers, which is exactly what we're seeing in the market right now.
So that's really interesting. And as we look at the next segment, 340B, there seems to be something missing in this space, and that really is innovation. We know how critical that is to both sales and retention for these vendors. So what's going on in this space?
Well, here's our best guess about what we're seeing here, and knowing this market fairly well. 340B solutions really are very targeted solutions to solve a very specific problem. We're more likely to see higher innovation scores in markets where you're maybe automating an entire market, or you're doing something innovative such as an AI solution, or you're creating efficiency like a patient flow solution. Those are some of the markets where maybe there's more latitude to have innovation. In the 340B market, maybe somebody will come along and prove this wrong. Maybe there's not as much latitude to have this innovation. So when we look at this market, outside of PharmaForce 340B, you see almost everybody predicted to have medium to low sales. And PharmaForce customers really indicate with that likely to recommend that they feel like they found the premier solution in the market. But the retention scores, so here's the view of past versus predicted sales. So we have seen fairly high sales from Verity and PharmaForce, and some from MacroHelix, and we expect PharmaForce likely to even lead out more in the future. And Verity and MacroHelix to continue to see some sales, RX Strategy and Sentry to go down. When we look at the ranks behind these, notice how really ones and twos pretty much across the board for the delivery of new technology rank. And so I like to look over the likely to recommend rank, and you can see that PharmaForce 340B rank of 14, customers indicating that they feel like they're really on the premier solution in the market. And MacroHelix rank of 13, feeling like they're on a leading solution. And so those are some key differences that we see here. it should be noted that PharmaForce 340B customers are different in composition than some of the other customer bases. They tend to be a little bit smaller. They tend to be more standalone organizations. So there is some differences here that the model doesn't take into account, that you don't have the exact same type of customer base across the board.
Yeah, there are going to be some nuances in that customer base where they're essentially meeting different needs for different customers.
Exactly. And as we look at retention, again, we're expecting high retention from PharmaForce, medium retention from MacroHelix and Verity, and low retention from RX Strategies and Sentry Data Systems, which is a lot of what we think that we've seen these last couple of years also. So more continuation of the same. However, if you're in this market segment, you can expect that PharmaForce may continue to be a disruptive influence in the market segment.
So I'm excited to dive into this next one with IV workflow management. There's something interesting happening here where you would traditionally look at the market leader and expect that they could bank on, a certain level of considerations and purchases from customers. And in this space, you have Baxter, who is the market share leader, and yet they're predicted to have the lowest sales and retention. So walk me through what's going on here.
Yeah, so this is an interesting market. And really, for a lot of years, KLAS wanted to measure this market, and there were so few other customers besides the Baxter DoseEdge. Baxter acquired DoseEdge a good number of years ago. Besides the Baxter DoseEdge solution, that we didn't even have a market to measure. Today, you're seeing some of these other competitors coming up with solutions, starting to see some traction. And these are somewhat niche solutions. However, if you are in a hospital, you want to make sure that your hospital is using one of these solutions. These are really, really critical. But in a lot of ways, we're seeing the Baxter DoseEdge solution, maybe it's a high functionality solution, but maybe a little bit stagnant in terms of relationship, stagnant in terms of new innovation. And what we're seeing is that Grifols and Epic coming forward. Epic obviously has an integration advantage. And BD likely seeing some sales because of their sole source advantage. So BD customers, as they buy a lot of different hardware in the pharmacy across the board, likely to possibly consider this software, and Baxter being low. So as you look at some of the drivers, you see the likely to recommend for BD is fascinating. It's at a 3. So customers are essentially, they rate high as far as supports integration goals, which is really that sole source piece. So as they, and their satisfaction is a good amount lower. So what are BD customers essentially saying? What is this quantification of their perspective saying? They're saying that they're buying because it's part of a sole source buy. After they buy it, they say, this isn't the best on the market. And it's mediocre to average, but that doesn't mean that buying activity isn't still happening. Grifols customers reporting that they feel like they're on a premier solution and maybe a little bit moderately innovative and good integration. Epic also, we're seeing some sales, and that integration definitely factors in there. So anyway, on the retention side, we're expecting to see Grifols and Epic continue to hold on to their customers. And DoseEdge and Baxter and BD, the model is predicting that they won't hold on to their customers. The truth, though, is that in this case with BD, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. The model is predicting low retention because of satisfaction. However, BD has that sole source strength when it comes to holding on to their customers. Part of being a full sole source solution set, and that may be able to help them hold on. However, if you're BD, you look at this and you think, hey, this is a solution that's riding on the coattails of other solutions, and it's weighing down the customer experience that we're having across the board. And we may need to look at that because you can just only have so many solutions that weigh down the customer experience before that full package is just not as strong as it needs to be.
Next up, we have medication inventory management. And so really Epic and Omnicell have been the 2 long-time satisfaction leaders in this market. So are they expected to maintain that lead here?
This is an interesting market. This feels like a market, and we've both watched this market for a number of years. It feels like a market that is slowly developing, but just in slow motion, right? So we've watched this for a lot of years. There's been a lot of years that I've personally been wrong in saying, okay, this is the year that medication inventory management is really going to move forward, and there's going to be a lot of buying activity. And we see some buying activity. So as you look at our predictions, you see 21 decisions that we came across in 2020 and 2021. So it's out there and it is happening, but it just continues to, the dam has not broken in terms of a lot of organizations adopting these solutions as much as we would expect. However, you're exactly right that the model is predicting that Epic and Omnicell, they're seen as more innovative, and they're predicted to really be the sales leaders as hopefully this market starts to open up some. Epic Willow is seen as really being a premier, Willow inventory, I should say, is really being a premier market solution. So the customer's rating very high as far as likely to recommend for that. Again, BD, similar to some of the other stories that we've seen, riding strong integration but weak elsewhere. And then we really see Swisslog struggling quite a bit in this market. So again, Epic and Omnicell, as we look at this chart here, Epic and Omnicell likely growing or continuing to see some higher sales compared to the market, higher sales share. And when we look at why that is, let's first go from Swisslog and then BD and move up. So Swisslog, very low as far as new innovation. This is a new early stage market. Innovation is really critical. So that delivery of new technology rank is really a weight for them. As we compare that to an Omnicell, where that's an 11, customers are a lot more likely to be talking about the innovation and what they're seeing there. So, as we look at BD, a lower, moderate to lower innovation rank, lower on the executive partnership. Compare BD to Epic, where Epic has a 12 for executive involvement. So customers reporting, hey, they're working with us a lot, they're listening to our needs. Again, in an early stage market, you would expect that these indicators really are very critical. So an opportunity for BD to really improve some of that partnership and what they're doing there. And then when you look at likely to recommend, Epic really stands out as customers reporting by their ranks that they feel like that they're really on the premier solution, and supports integration goals. Interestingly, Epic Willow is not extremely high there. There is a lot to integrate to. And so where we see that being higher are your medication cabinet vendors with BD and Omnicell, that integration is a key part as to why customers are reporting satisfaction or why they bought. If we look at the retention side, we're expecting to see fairly good retention for Omnicell, Epic, and BD. BD a little bit lower, and as we see a little bit lower satisfaction there, and a little bit lower on the likely to recommend rank. Swisslog, we expect them to continue to really struggle.
All right, the next space that we're going to be taking a look at is the clinical decision support space, specifically looking at care plans and order sets. And so this is another market where both competitors have similar predicted sales and retention. So does that make for a bit of a stagnant market where we're seeing, this kind of even spread here between the two of them?
I think stagnant is probably one of the best words to use right now for this market. Not to be overly critical, but as we talk to customers about this market, it just doesn't feel very dynamic. Both, and in some ways that's a compliment to the market. You have both Zinc Health and Elsevier with pretty high satisfaction, customers reporting some good things. There are some differences that we can examine between these two. So as we look here a little bit closer, you see that Elsevier has a higher rank when it comes to integration, and Zinc has a higher rank when it comes to executive involvement, so that partnership question, right? Both very high on the likely to recommend, and satisfaction for both is high, probably fairly comparable. So really, their predicted sales are very similar. We're also not seeing a ton of sales activity right now, which is why we can't show what did it look like for past sales. And so as we talk to CMIOs and other executives out there, and we bring up this subject, it tends to be a little bit of an energy dip. Not that they're, some energy can be negative, or they're very frustrated about where things are at. And right now it tends to be, this is working pretty well for us. When we look at retention, again, we see high retention from both solutions. So not a lot of customers that are shedding and going over to other solutions. So our best guess is that at the end of 2022, this market will look a lot like it does in terms of market share and motion in the end of 2021.
Interesting. All right, continuing on this theme as we're looking at clinical decision support, next up we're going to take a closer look at point of care clinical reference. So it is well known that Wolters Kluwer UpToDate product is long been the preferred solution in this space and definitely a trusted choice by physicians. However, EBSCO's Dynamed continues to really make some inroads here. So what is the model predicting?
Yeah, so this is really interesting to say, where do we expect that this market is going to go? Do we continue to expect Dynamed making some inroads? Has it been dramatic growth? It has not been dramatic growth. But the model is predicting that it could possibly open up to be more dramatic growth in the future. Obviously, that factor that you mentioned, which is that UpToDate is the preferred, the experienced choice. So physicians have a lot of experience with UpToDate, and making that switch over to Dynamed is a little bit challenging. However, we are seeing organizations who are making that switch, and it's really interesting to watch in this market if an organization can really work through the change management of getting all their physicians to be able to handle the changeover to a Dynamed, then they will tend to be really, really happy on the other side. We do see some. I spoke to one just a few weeks ago, an organization that tried to make the jump and then ended up falling back. Any organizations that are looking at these two products know that there's a big price difference between the two, so that's part of the reason why you see organizations making the jump. However, as we look at Dynamed, it's really interesting. Predicted high sales, and obviously there's some error here. So we really do, if class were to take a guess at it, not the model, class analysts would say, no, we really expect UpToDate to continue to sell, given the strong physician's choice preference that's out there. However, if you're Wolters Kluwer, you should be keeping an eye on Dynamed. And a lot of that is the experience that they're creating. Look at the difference in executive involvement rank. Wolters Kluwer, a little bit more of an experience of, hey, it is what it is. We just give it to you. Dynamed, much more of a partnership, communicative type of engagement. It's also really interesting to look at likely to recommend between the two products, really neck and neck. And so we are continuing to see possibly signs of more disruption in this market.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting as you look at this space, I mean, so often you have the end user perspective, but then you also have those that are making the buying decisions. And sometimes they might be at odds.
Yes.
And so it's not always a perfect predictor to know, depending on who we're talking to, that end user that might love something, but those that are making those buying decisions might have other motives to make those decisions. So that seems to be coming to play here.
Yep. And as we look at retention, we're seeing a fairly similar trend here with Dynamed having very high predicted retention and UpToDate having more on the average side. And it's some of the very same drivers that we talked about. There are a couple other products that we watch here with Elsevier, Clinical Key, and IBM Micromedics. Those solutions are a little bit different, a little bit more targeted towards nursing, or just a little bit different solutions. But really, your more apples to apples comparisons are those two.
Interesting. All right, our next space that we're going to be looking at is infection control and monitoring. So Class has watched this market since the beginning. And the first solution in the market was the Theradox solution, which is now owned by Premier. And they really had that first mover advantage in this space. So where are they now? What are we predicting for them in this coming year?
Well, maybe similar to Baxter DoseEdge, the model is saying, hey, this is the product that's a little bit older and it's a little bit more tired, and there's some other solutions that possibly are offering some disruption to the market. And that's likely what we're seeing in the market, what we have been seeing some, and what we're likely going to continue to see. Epic has their Bugsy solution, which has some of that integration, and we expect to see some strong sales. You also have Wolters Kluwer, likely the model is predicting to be a disruptor, to continue to be a disruptor in this market. And so Century 7 model is predicting that we'll see some more disruption from them. If you rewind several years ago, they were very much on the outside of infection control. The model is now predicting that you may be seeing a little bit more. This market is not seeing a lot of new decisions. And so as we talk about disruption, it's a little bit tough because we're not seeing a lot of new decisions go out. If we were, we would probably be expecting more that we'd be seeing from Wolters Kluwer. And then you've got the Premier Theradox solution with the lowest predicted sales. And as you look at that, you can see some of the questions like delivery of new technology, a rank of 1. Executive involvement is quite high for even a BD or a Wolters Kluwer at a 15 or a 12 rank. And here you can see it's down at an 8 for Premier. So a product that feels a little bit stagnant to customers. Yes, it has great functionality, but it doesn't feel like it's going somewhere. And a lot of times that's what customers, as we watch their buying decisions, they're not just looking for a product that has arrived, they're looking for a product that's going somewhere. Mm-hmm. And this model is indicating that Premier maybe doesn't fit that ticket.
Yeah, that's so critical as customers are looking at where is my vendor going and am I aligned with their vision? And it's so essential for them to have that shared vision with their vendor.
As we were talking about, not a lot of turnover in this market. You possibly have lower retention with the Premier Theradoc. However, if class were to guess outside of the model, we would say, yeah, you're going to see some retention turnover, but this is not a space where we're seeing a lot of changing. And if we are seeing changing, a lot of times it's happening as customers go over to their enterprise integrated solution. So Epic is definitely taking some. And so the Epic sales is likely a little bit understated, as we've definitely seen a good number of customers go over to that. But for Wolters Kluwer Vigilance and Epic Bugsy, expect to continue to see pretty high retention here.
Great. So as we look at our second to last space, we're looking at pharmacy surveillance. So this is really a market with a lot of high satisfaction solutions. So who really stands out in this space?
As you look at this, customer loyalty is really high. You've got a lot of these customer bases rating really high for likely to recommend. So it's interesting to hear a lot of these solutions indicating that they feel like that they're on the best product in the market. Premier lags behind in sales and retention predictions, as they have a little bit lower ranks for executive involvement, integration, and also forecasted satisfaction. And we really see Wolters Kluwer and Vigilance probably seeing some of the most growth potential. Similar to infection control, a little bit of a sleepy space, not nearly as many decisions as what we've seen. So class has tracked only 13 decisions in 2020 and 2021. And you can see here that we're predicting Wolters Kluwer and Vigilance to see continued high sales. BD might be seeing some more high sales in the future. And you can see where that's coming from. So Wolters Kluwer Century 7, the prediction is mostly keying off of that likely to recommend at a 15. Customers really feeling like it's a premier solution. The partnership piece is a little bit lower on that solution, so that's an interesting view. But and then when we look at retention, there are some differences, but we're expecting average to above average retention for every solution in the market except for Premier.
So interesting. And I spoke too soon, because if we think that this is high scoring, we haven't yet looked at integration engines, which is a very high scoring space. So really, as we're looking at all of these high performers, how do we really tease out who is going to be the leader or the laggard in this space? So where are you predicting that you'd see more sales energy in this space?
This is an interesting space where you look at the class scores and you say there's almost no differences here, right? When you look at the ranks, then you start to see that there likely are some differences, and the customers going to market are seeing some differences. So InterSystems has the highest sales prediction, very loyal customers indicating that they feel like they're on the premier solution. Delivery of new technology higher than the other competitors. Infor, we know that they're quite vulnerable, so they have scores that are quite a bit lower. What's really interesting is to look at is a Lineate. So let's look at this. So Lineate is interesting. They have a class score of close to a 91, so really high satisfaction, but low predicted sales. You start saying, well, why is that predicted sales so low? Well, the partnership piece, the delivery of new technology. So this getting close to customers, not just delivering an integration engine, but really working with customers on the integration engine. As we look at the ranks of a Lineate core point, also a little bit lower, but as we look at InterSystems, higher ranks on delivery of new technology, a little bit higher on executive involvement, and a higher prediction overall for sales. So that it does appear that there are some differences. And from what we've seen, not a lot of decisions, but we have seen a good number of decisions who have gone the route of InterSystems. When it comes to retention, however, Infor, we would predict to likely see some turnover, but the other solutions, we're really expecting to see them hold on to their customers, as their class scores indicate that they've done a very good job.
This has been so fascinating. Thank you for walking us through this, Taylor. Thanks for joining us today in our Vendor Excellence series as we looked at the sales and retention model for these particular spaces. If you have any additional questions about your space, feel free to reach out to your class representative. And please join us in our next series as we'll continue to look at additional verticals using this model.